So let's say you're the one in a relationship, whether romantic, personal, professional, any relationship that tends to lean in, that tends to want to kind of get together, get closer, connect, talk through things, you know, uh, really just like have closeness, right? Commune with each other. Then, in order to take the next step in your relationship, in order to transform it, you need to be the one that is able to have space, to invite independence, autonomy, distance. Why? Because your automatic impulse is to get closer. And likely the other person's impulse is the opposite. They may have an impulse, especially in romantic relationships, this is the case, right? When one person is holding the pole, like this is a polarity. One person is holding the pole of autonomy, and the other person's holding the pole of communion or connection. And there's usually this dance, like, one person is like, oh, the other person's like, oh, come here, close, right? Well, that's the automatic way that we operate in relationships. In order to transform, if I'm the one that holds the autonomy piece, I need to lean in. I need to go against my impulses, add the ability to lean in and develop that muscle. What that also does is that it also takes off the burden from the other person who's got the automatic impulse to lean in. And if they see that you're the one leaning in, they can breathe again. They can breathe, and then maybe they can lean out. They can actually find space and autonomy. Because ultimately, what happens is that each of us in every relationship, we hold a pole of a polarity. And a polarity is two interdependent values that are both needed in order for any relationship to thrive over time. And so if you only have one or the other, it falls apart, right? So if both people are always independent, autonomous, then you don't have any chemistry. You just sort of float away from each other. If both people are always together and fused, then 5 years later, people look back and say, I just lost my life. I don't have my own. There's codependence there, right? And so in order for evolution to unlock and awaken in the relationship, and this is the purpose of life, is to participate in this current of evolutionary love, which is moving in all things, which longs for more wholeness, greater wholeness. Evolution is about two parts coming together to form larger wholes. And every time you have that, it's a transformation. It's the current moving forward and bringing more unity and wholeness to all things, integration, connection. And so in order for um, that to happen in any relationship, I need to recognize what is my automatic unconscious tendency. There's another one. Am I always the one to lead and direct, or am I always the one to follow and go with the flow? Right? Notice that. Because if I'm always kind of falling into the comfort zone of my automatic patterns, what happens is that we actually fall into comfort instead of transformation. And in order to transform, in order to participate in evolutionary love, there has to be an edge that we're leaning out into the discomfort into, right? And so if I'm the one always leading, always directing, then maybe what I need to do is pause and wait for the other person to lead and direct, or invite the other person's opinion or vision or direction, and then trust them, follow them, even if it's messy, especially if it's at the beginning when it's hard for people to figure that out, right? There's other ways that we do this, right? Do you tend to think of really interesting ideas and be in this imaginal space of possibility? Or are you the person that's about practical, grounded action, sensory evidence, right? So sort of practical, what's the data, right? If both people are in the imaginal realm, it's got a lot of inspiration, but actually you lose steam because nothing actually happens. if both people are in this sensory practical realm, then you might have a lot of action, but when the going gets tough, when there's the unknown, and when there's a need for a revisioning of what's possible, neither people will be able to do it because they're stuck in what's the next thing I'm doing? What's the next thing I'm doing? What's the practical, right, evidence? And so one person, in that case, one person needs to break away, and you need to hold both poles, right? So one person needs to take the imaginal pole, the other person needs to take the sensory practical application pole. But then if both people are always in that role, when the circumstances actually require something more complex, then what's needed is that we need to let go of our automatic poles, our automatic tendencies. And when I say pole, I don't mean P-U-L-L, I mean P-O-L-E, pole, right? And so that's really important, right? And so, for example, this is a great example in my own community, my own household. I live with 5 other people. I tend to be the one with the big ideas and imaginal, kind of looking at principles and values and big picture, right? And there's a couple others that are about very practical, every day. Is the kitchen clean? What's the system for organizing chores? What's the system for determining what the washer and dryer is doing? How do we ensure everyone's keeping the physical space clean? And if I'm always relying on them to kind of prompt that, then I'm settling into a comfort zone that actually disconnects me. It disconnects me from the field of value, from the field of intimacy within which we are all participating, within the field of evolutionary love that we're all participating in. It disconnects me. I just fall into a comfort zone, and I outsource that value onto others. And what that ends up doing is that slowly what happens is that it actually disconnects people, right? Now, it doesn't mean that we have to sort of artificially force ourselves to do things against what we're naturally capable of and gifted at. In fact, we also want to reinforce and express our gifts and our strengths for the sake of the whole. But what happens is that when there's a calling, when there's a need, let's just say, for example, that the person in the house that is about practical application and cleanliness feels like, oh, why am I always the one to bring up X, Y, and Z? Well, that's a signal. Oh, that's a signal. Okay, in her, there's a signal of resentment and bitterness. And so that's a sign that, oh, maybe I need to take more responsibility for that. Likewise, if I'm in a situation where I'm feeling like I'm a little like resentful that we're not thinking big enough here, and someone else gets whiff of that, which actually that's what actually happened. One of my housemates, I told her this. I felt like we're playing small, and I want to look at big picture, bigger ideas together. And she said, you know what? Try me. Let's have conversations about that. She invited me in because she recognized that she didn't want me to hold that pole alone. And when we want to develop true intimacy in our relationships, it's really about weaving together these polarities within ourselves and between each other so that it's like a meshwork, right? It's like overlapping, integrated, like we're weaving together the fabric of intimacy and eros, E-R-O-S, eros, in the cosmos. And that unlocks the aliveness. I mean, I'm feeling it just talking about it, just pointing it out. It unlocks the aliveness, right, in who we are and what we're doing between our relationships, because it unlocks the evolutionary love, which is the same force that animates the entire cosmos and moves all things towards more wholeness, more connection, more aliveness, more intimacy. So there you go. May you discover what it is that you find is calling you in more higher levels of intimacy in relationships.